Welcome to the Dear Lovejoy podcast, and it's a special, not a special. I turned myself into a political interviewer again this week, and an interview Alastair Campbell. I was like a young Paxman. I was like Peston or Andrew. I'm a combination of them all.
It
Andrew
was Frost
Marr.
Nixon.
It was just like that, wasn't it?
Except
Except the questions weren't as intellectual. No, it was really good actually. We covered a lot of subjects today. He was here to talk about his book, Saturday Bloody Saturday, but we covered.
That's a novel, isn't it?
Yeah, we covered off masses of stuff.
Oh, it was great because maybe slightly to some people, politics is slightly off-putting sometimes, isn't it?
Yep.
But he's so interesting with it, but also sports winners, some mental health stuff. But he's very good at talking. It's not a sort of miserable listen. It's an interesting sort of guiding listen, I think.
And also for any people who are interested in politics, or anyone who studies the history of politics as well, anyone who's really got in-depth knowledge, I come up with a solution.
Oh my God!
At the end,
dear me,
I come up with a solution for politics, which I think could be world-changing. So it could change the world.
Spoil it.
Change the world.
Don't want to spoil it for anyone, but you lost my vote. I'm going to have to take my. Vote Tim car sticker off my bike.
Okay, well, let's get on with it. You can tell me what you think. Here's Alastair Campbell in my kitchen.
This is just a guide to modern life. Modern life is hard to get just right. It can frustrate you and annoy. And if it does, right into Dear Lovejoy.
Alastair, welcome to my kitchen. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Very nice kitchen.
As always, I buy everyone a present, and I thought I'd buy you this. This is it's in my top 3 favourite books. Even might be my top 1 favourite book. He's from South Korea. He's a monk, and it's Hayman Island. And the title of the book, what's it say again? I can't remember the title.
Things you can see only when you slow down.
I thought it would be appropriate for you because you do have quite a busy life, quite a fascinating life. I watch you a lot on TV, and you're always getting people. You're very animated with your opinions and ideas, and people are very argumentative with you. And I thought it'd be quite a nice, relaxing book.
Yeah, cool.
I turn to that all the time. So it's
Is
nice.
it Buddhist?
Yeah, but it's just a lovely little thing. But it's really it's captured the imagination of everyone.
3 million copies sold.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I bottled it when I interviewed him because I didn't ask him what he's done with the money. Because he was so peaceful and lovely, I also didn't ask him what he does about sex either, because that's the other question I sort of thought I wish I'd asked him, because he's obviously probably not indulging. I don't think Buddhist monks do, and I just thought it's quite a big thing to give up that, isn't it?
Well, that's very kind. I'll definitely read that.
I'll flick through it, I haven't.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you enjoy the argument? As I say, I see you on TV arguing a lot with people. Do you enjoy that?
Do I enjoy arguing? Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I do. I enjoy it. In fact, I'm going off from here today for a big Brexit argument with a big Brexiteer. I think, I like thinking about the things that you think about, that you're arguing about.
Yeah.
So, and I know I've probably got a reputation for, being full on and, don't change my views and what have you. But I do put my own views under scrutiny as well. So I argue with myself quite a lot.
What happens though after a TV appearance like something like Question Time or Peston or Andrew Marr, when you've really been at loggerheads with other people on a show, what happens afterwards? Is it all calm and nice, or does the argument continue?
It depends. The only time it's really, really, really kicked off after an event was a Question Time, and it's when I was on the same panel as John McDonnell.
Right.
And it was quite a weird one because I'd been very determined not to just get into a kind of slangy match with him. Anna Soubry was the Tory on the panel. She really, really, really went for him. Mm-hmm. Said he was a horrible little man and all this sort of stuff. And then he sort of turned on me. And it really kicked off. And then afterwards, I'm afraid it was a bit of a red mist thing. So it did kick off. And my daughter dragged me out. So
is that because you're not supporting them?
No, I think it was because we had a fundamental disagreement. I think he. What it was for me was I suddenly realised, and I don't think I'd thought this before, I suddenly had this very strong sensation that here's a guy, very, very important in the Labour Party, to which I've devoted quite a lot of my life, actually despises, was the word I felt, me, way more than the Tories.
Oh, right.
I found that really, really weird. The fact that a Tory could provoke him in such a way that he suddenly sort of launches into one on me. And also started saying things like, you're the man who's lost us 5 million votes. And I'm thinking, where's he coming? We won 3 elections.
Yeah.
We might have, including one of them after the Iraq War. And so afterwards, it was just like, and I said to him, I said, John, this is literally as we came off the set. I said, do you actually want to win? Have you got any real desire to win? He said, oh, don't you worry, we'll win. We'll do it without people like you. And I thought, wow, So that's the only time I think it's ever... David Dimbleby, because normally what happens after question time is there's a dinner. David Dimbleby hosts this dinner and usually if it's out of town, most people go. McDonald didn't go to that one, but Dimbleby said afterwards, he said he'd done a lot of question times. He said he'd never quite known a moment like that. He said it really felt like a moment.
You can push people's buttons though, can't you? Don't you think you're one of those people who can do that?
Yeah, probably, but I've never quite understood why. Because I think I'm very straightforward. Now maybe I'm not very good at analysing myself. I don't know, but I feel I'm very straightforward. And so, do I push buttons? Yeah, I've always seemed to provoke people. It's true.
And does that worry you?
No.
Like when you were going to do Sunday brunch and it was announced,
Yeah.
you get some people saying, "Well, I'm not watching it." Then I mean you must understand that I get people who hate me as well on social media. It's just part and parcel of the job of being in the public eye. But does that affect you at all? Doesn't it? It affects me.
No, it really doesn't. I think it would. Does it affect me? See, this is where you've got to try to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I don't think it does. I really don't care about anything that's said on social media, good or bad, to be honest.
Really? Okay, so
what I care about, I mean, I think you've got to. So, like, I'll give an example. Here we are. We're talking just after Stephen Hawking's death, right?
Yeah.
And so, amazing bloke, extraordinary life, and all that. And so yesterday, and I've got this thing about when people die. I think there's something very strange goes on in our culture. Everybody's nice about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of people, that makes them feel better about the fact that most of the time, not least on social media, they're being absolutely horrible to other people. And likewise with journalists, they can absolutely lacerate somebody while they're alive. And then when they're dead, he was a great guy.
Yeah.
So, and I think the other thing that happens in our culture is we depoliticize around death. So I did a tweet. I just tweeted, I said, amid all the wonderful deserved tributes to Stephen Hawking, let's just remember, let's never forget he was one of the most passionate defenders of the health service, and he was utterly passionate in his belief that Brexit is going to damage science and it's going to damage the country he loves. Now, and I must admit, did a part of me think, people are going to say you're exploiting, politicising a death? But I think actually what I felt very, very strongly is that needed to be said.
Yeah. But you knew that would wind people up.
Yeah, but my point is it wound a lot of people up, but it also got, I mean, I really don't believe you measure life in retweets and likes, but it was like way beyond what most of my tweets do.
Yeah.
In a positive way.
Because I've always said I don't care about what people said about me on social media, and then I've had some mental health issues which we'll discuss later, but I suddenly had to be honest with myself one day and go, no, it actually does. Every time I turn on Twitter and people are saying horrible things about me, I thought I was thick-skinned. I'm not. It does annoy me, and it does make me feel sad, and especially when people are misinterpreting things I say and things I do. And,
yeah, but I think it's important that you understand why.
What I quite like about social media though is all the journalists who had free run before social media to absolutely hammer everyone. Who basically. There's a couple of publications which have trolled me for 20 years. Suddenly they're now being trolled by the and they don't like it. And I'm like, well, that's what you've been doing to celebrities all your life, hammering us for everything we did. Some bloke once wrote half a page on why I shouldn't get a job I wasn't up for. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. They're trying to take my career away from me before it's even happened. But when they get trolled, they're sort of
Yeah, but I think the thing I like about social media is it's a platform for anybody who wants to use it, but I don't think you should take it too seriously. So I genuinely don't care if my kids or my friends said stuff to me.
Yeah.
That would really hurt
Do
me.
you think when you're on Twitter, though, do you think you'll ever change anyone's opinion? Confirmation bias is huge.
Confirmation bias is huge.
When you say, don't forget what Stephen Hawking done, no one who's pro-Brexit is going to go, oh, well, I'm going to change my mind then.
No, they're not, but they might not have been aware.
Okay, fair point.
That he was, and they might have thought, "Oh, I didn't know that. I'm going to look that up. I'm going to." So, I think the thing is about the way the modern debate works is that none of us really know the impact of what we're saying.
Yeah,
because it's so kind of chaotic and noisy. And I mean, I did your Sunday brunch program recently.
Yeah,
and and I enjoyed it. I'd never seen the program before.
Boo.
I'm sorry. I don't watch much telly.
You're not a man of the people then.
I am a man of the people, but listen, Tim, you've got to get with the people. They don't watch telly anymore. They're on their, blah.
Yeah.
But what was really interesting about it was that how many people afterwards mentioned it, I'd say universally in a positive way. So all those people who, when you announced that I was on the programme, were going on Twitter and saying, oh, I'm not going to watch it, war criminal, blah, 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 blah. That's what they do. And if it hadn't have been me, it would have been...
Hold on. That must hurt, war criminal. That must really hurt.
No, because I'm not. And...
Yeah, but the idea that people would think that about
But
you.
they say it... I think the thing to understand is why they say it. They say it because they are really, really, really... there's a good reason for them saying it, okay?
Yeah.
The good reason for them saying it is they're really, really angry about Iraq and they think it was the worst mistake this government's made. And if they see somebody that's had anything to do with that, then they'll have a go, okay? The bad reason is, and I think this is a majority in that sphere, is they just like abusing people and they get fed a narrative by the places that they go to for their news, and that's where they end up. If I go back to the thing about my kids. If my mum, when she was alive, I thought I was a war criminal. If my kids thought I was, if my friends thought I was, if the people I worked with thought I was, then I'd have a real problem. I don't have a problem when it's people who are, just mouthing off at you. And here's an interesting thing that, because you must never, ever equate media opinion with public opinion. They're not the same thing. And I'll give you a really good example of this. During the Hutton Inquiry, which was a really difficult time for lots of people, but, I was at the centre of it. We had media outside our house, 24 hours a day.
Quickly remind us what it was about.
That was when David Kelly, government weapons inspector, took his own life amid the row that the government was having with the BBC. I was right at the heart of it, over weapons of mass destruction and the dossier that Tony Blair presented to Parliament. And I made the decision. You make these decisions, and the one thing I do if I tend to stick to them. I decided that whilst that was going on, once the inquiry had been announced, I was going to say literally nothing until I went to the inquiry. That was partly a way to give myself the strength just to deal with this maelstrom outside my house every time I came and went. So I used to go running every morning, okay? And I'd go out running. I remember one day, I got to the top of the road. Some of the photographers would sort of chase you for a bit, and then they'd stop. And I get to the top of the road, and I said literally not a word. Got to the top of the road, and this woman stopped me. I was vaguely aware of her, but she said, "Can I just have a word?" Oh God! So I stopped. I thought, here we go again. And she said, "I want you to know something. If we believed, we the people is what she meant. If we believed everything that they are saying about you, people outside my house," she said, "you wouldn't be able to go out for a run on your own. You know that, don't you?"
Yeah, but they do have an influence. When I interviewed Harriet Harman, when I read her book, I suddenly realised how influential some of the right-wing press had been potentially, where the enemy of
They are.
the enemy of the housewife and stuff like that. You used to get, and that was how Harriet was sort of, and obviously there was other politicians and people in the media who didn't like what she was doing because it didn't suit them.
Yeah.
And I listened to it, and it was reading that book that I suddenly realised, oh wow, I've been influenced by the media. So it does have an influence.
Of course it does. I'm not saying it doesn't have an influence, but Harriet's a very good example. Harriet has had a lot of bad press.
Yeah.
She's been whacked by the press over a lot of issues down through the years, but she's shown that if you keep going and if you're resilient, you can make change. So I think you say the press have had an influence, they have, but so has she, on the terms of debate and the way that women are seen in Britain.
Okay, as we're there, we might as well talk about, you invented New Labour. One of the big things that I thought you did was get Murdoch on your side. Do you think that as well?
I don't think it was that big, but I think it was helpful to us.
To get the Sun, a right-wing paper, onto your side is pretty huge.
Well, no, I think we talk too much about the press. I think the Sun backed us because they knew we were going to win. Was our winning helped by the fact that right-wing newspapers were not killing Tony Blair in the way that they tried to kill Michael Foot or Tony Blair, or they're trying to do Jeremy Corbyn now? Probably. But what was driving it, I go back to the point. You see, I think what happens in the media world is everybody focuses on their world, the media. So the Mail say this, the Sun say this, the Mirror say this, the Star. I'm not saying it doesn't have an influence on the debate, but I think New Labour and under Tony's leadership, I think it was what we were doing strategically, politically, and on policy that I think made people realise this change was real, and they were willing to give it a go and come behind it. So I think I really wouldn't overstate it. Where I think there has been a massive influence of the right-wing media in this country is not necessarily, although it was involved in the Brexit vote, it was in preparing the ground for a politics where Cameron felt he had to have a referendum. Right. So that's big influence, and bad influence.
What about Brexit in a minute? But where did you, as the public, we sort of think you probably go and sit down with Rupert Murdoch and have a drink with him and decide that he's going to be on your side. Does that actually happen?
No, in fact, I think if you read my volume 1 of my diaries, when we went to Australia, to the Hayman Island, and it was controversial at the time. Tony, young leader of the opposition, Murdoch invites him out to Australia to do a speech to all the editors of all Murdoch's titles around the world. It was really controversial. I remember Bruce Grocott, who was Tony's private parliamentary secretary, really angry, and he came and saw me and said, listen, you shouldn't be doing this. People are going to hate this in the party. And I said, I know they are, but it's a really good platform for us. And it wasn't just a good platform of going out to Murdoch and his editors. It was the fact that the controversy around it would lend itself to being a place and a platform that we could really use to put out a broader message. And actually it was quite a significant speech that Tony made out there. What was really interesting as well, I wrote this in my diaries, I don't remember this, but I know it happened because I've written about it in my diaries, was Murdoch. I get a real glimpse into the way that Murdoch works with his papers, because he was, and Paul Keating, Australian Prime Minister at the time, he actually, we met up with him in Sydney, and we flew up with him, and he came with us. And I remember him saying, the thing about Murdoch, he said, he's a bad bastard, and the only people he respects are people that he thinks can be bad bastards as well. And he says he's one of those people, you can do deals with him without saying a deal's ever been done. And I think that is what you should have in mind. It was like, it wasn't you back us, and it was more that, and actually I think if you look at what our agenda on Europe, for example, it was very hostile to what they stood for. But it was a kind of tonal thing that we no longer were going to portray them, if you like, as enemies. But I don't think it was as important as what we were saying on tax or what we're saying on health service. I really don't think it's that important.
I want to move on because I've got lots to talk to you about. But just very quickly, on New Labour, how important was that word New Labour? Do you think it was important for me? As you know, I said to Harriet Harman, I didn't think Labour was a particularly attractive prospect until Tony Blair came along. The party was in a bit of disarray. Actually, before that, it sort of moved along a bit. But that word New Labour, it was important, wasn't it?
I think it crystallised something that was real. I mean, I can remember when Tony first asked me to work for him, and it was obvious to me he really wanted to make big change. And his very first conference in 1994 as party leader, after he'd been elected leader, up in Blackpool, and a few of us knew he was going to do this thing, announce a review of the Constitution, which was kind of code, if you like, for getting rid of Clause 4 of the old Constitution, which was all about, taking over the means of production exchange, blah, blah, blah. And so we knew it was going to be a big thing. And we had this debate about, what slogan to put on the backdrop. You see, like, at the moment, Jeremy Corbyn, many not the few, Theresa, whatever, is a future for us all. I can't remember what her slogan is. But we had this discussion about it. And I remember saying, look, why don't we just say New Labour, New Britain? Because that's what we're saying. And even Tony and even Peter Mandelson, who were like arch modernisers, to some ways, way more modernising. I was always a bit more trad in some ways. But I think the reason why it was important is because it was saying bluntly what we were saying.
Yeah.
So why not do it? I think one of the problems at the moment with the whole Brexit debate is that you've got a feeling that both sides aren't really saying what they think. Theresa May doesn't really believe in this.
Let's get onto that in a minute. I want to talk to you about your book though, because that's why you've come here. Saturday Bloody Saturday. As you don't know my work, I'm going to pretend not to know yours. Is this your first fiction?
No. How can you say you know my work if you're asking me if it's my
just
first
said
novel?
I'm pretending I don't know your work because you don't know
Oh,
my work.
sorry.
I know your diaries. Know you've written a book about.
So you've done no
winners.
research at all?
None on you, no, because you don't watch my show. Tell us what this. I've
written
this book is about.
15 books in my time, and this is my fourth novel.
Right.
It's the first book I've written with somebody else.
Yeah. Paul Fletcher,
former Burnley player.
Yeah.
It was his idea. It's a novel about a struggling northern football club in the 1970s with an alcoholic manager trying to save his job, with this really wacky array of characters that he has to rely on in his life, footballers. And alongside it, there's another team, which is an IRA active service unit, which is waiting actually not far from here. And because they know where Merlin Rees, Northern Ireland Secretary in the Labour government, they know where he's going to be staying on a particular Saturday night, and they're going to take him out.
How's the book doing?
Doing well. It got in the Sunday Times top 10 first week. I wish the publishing industry could get its act together in terms of distribution. If I had £1 for every person who's texted me or emailed me saying, tried to get your book in X shop, and they ... and they wonder why Amazon are killing them. So if there's any publishers out there listening, get your acts together. But it's done well. And I think it's interesting because one of the reasons, I'll just tell you the story about how it came together. Paul Fletcher was a player for Burnley, my team, in the 70s. And then he came back as chief executive 20, 30 years later. Yeah, 30 years later it would be. And he and I became really good friends. I, by then, was quite well known as a big Burnley fan and just became really good mates. And now he picks me up at Preston Station, drives me to Burnley, drives me back and what have you. And it was on one of these trips he just said, listen, I'm writing a novel, what do you think? No, in fact, he said, don't laugh, I'm writing a novel. And I said, and I laughed, because he's not a writer,
Right.
But he showed me what he'd written, and it wasn't written in a way that a publisher was going to take as a novel, but it had a fantastic story in it. And so we agreed to do it together, and we've had a lot of fun doing it, a lot of fun.
What we were talking before you came on Sunday brunch in the green room about football in the 70s and 80s. Have I got rose-tinted glasses, or was it a different sport back then? Was it a different thing?
It wasn't a different sport, but it was very, very, very different.
By the way, I've just watched the Kenny Dalglish documentary a few months before, and what Kenny did for Liverpool Football Club is absolutely amazing. And when you start, and when very true. He went to all the funerals at Hillsborough. It was absolutely incredible. That documentary, by the way, Kenny, if you get a chance to watch it, do. But
No, I've seen it.
You start looking at the football. It just, for some reason, it just feels much more real.
Well, I think there's
meant
something
more.
in that. I think there's something in that. I mean, I follow Burnley, and I have done all my life, and the last few years have been amongst the best years being a Burnley fan. But I think what this book does, in fact, this started because Fletch was on holiday with his grandchildren, and they kept saying to him, what was it like when you were like playing for Burnley in the top division? And it was almost like they were, in their minds, they're thinking he was like, his life must have been like Gareth Bale today or Wayne Rooney or what have you. So he kept telling them just how different it was. And so if you go through, so this is a book, for example, where, the manager's Scottish, every single member of the team is British, the pitches are bad. There's one scene in there, because we've got a fictional team playing against real teams.
Yeah.
So there's one scene where we're playing against Leeds United. It's Don Revie, it's Billy Bremner, it's Johnny Giles, it's Peter Lorimer, it's that team. And there's and the manager hates Don Revie. Our manager, Charlie Gordon, hates Don Revie. So he's saying something about Revie and swearing. And he's got his number 2 next to him, who's saying, Gaffer, don't stop the effing and the blinding, because with the main game on Match of the Day tonight, it might be picked up. Now, if you think about it, today, those managers have a camera on them literally every minute. Every second of every minute of every game, they are on camera. Now, so this era, it's the start of television, it's the start of big money. Paul Fletcher, when he came to Burnley, was our most expensive ever player.
How much?
66,000.
Wow, that's a lot.
So it's the start of money. It's the start of wags.
But was there like Burnley? Let's say, for instance, that team probably meant a lot to the people of Burnley in the 70s. Does it mean as much now? I know they're doing very well, but
Well, funny enough, when Paul was a player, it was in their contracts that they had to live within 6 miles of the stadium.
But they probably went around to all the schools and stuff and did all.
To be fair, we've got a fantastic community project, community team, and I think do the players care as much about the place and the town? Probably not. I think we don't actually have that many foreign players, but I think there's something about Burnley. Look, I don't look at the past with rose-tinted spectacles. I just look at Burnley with rose-tinted spectacles.
Yeah.
We are a very, very special club. I really believe that. I think most, if you go to Burnley, like you go to most towns and cities, and there's a cathedral, you see a big church or something, or it might be a hospital, right? You go to Burnley. The thing that stands out at the centre of the town is the football ground. It's right there in the middle of town. The first thing you see, whichever way you come in. And we have, I think us and Middlesbrough have the highest proportion of local population that attend a football club anywhere in the UK.
Right.
So
that's good. So it does mean something to the city.
I think it means a lot. I think listen, when we nearly went out of the league in 1987, when we had to win the last game of the season to stay in the Football League, I think if the club had gone, I mean, Burnley's a town still with a lot of challenges, but I think if the club had gone, that would have been almost like a death blow.
Yeah.
But I think for these players, I mean, look, I don't like the way that we talk about footballers as though they're meant to be ambassadors and politicians.
Yeah,
and
role
they're
models.
footballers.
Yeah.
They're not role models to me.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I think if you talk to most Burnley players, I think they sense that something special. But the truth is, most of them live in Wilmslow or Manchester or Leeds or Harrogate, wherever it might be.
You like all sport, don't you? Apart from horse racing and Formula One. I do my research. Yeah. You're not a massive fan on them, but you do. You like all sports, but. My love affair with sport is slightly waning at the moment. I thought, because I've got you on and you wrote a book on winners, I might just have this discussion with you, because I'm sort of 4 years ago, I'm in a cab driving along, and I was going through a bit of depression, and as you well know, when you're in depression, your reality changes, doesn't it? Quite dramatically, and you see things in a different way. The Commonwealth Games was on, and I just started listening to the words. It was quite a long car journey into London, and all the words, I actually wrote them down. I found them the other day, so I thought, cutthroat, ruthless, winner, selfish, no mercy, beaten, loser, missing out, injured, sacrifice, failure. These were the words which just came, and I thought, wow, sport is really quite a horrible thing sometimes when you're in a different reality state. And then you look at all the cheating happening with the Lance Armstrong, a massive hero, who then turns out, you start looking, it's quite an unsavoury prospect, really. Not amateur sport, but pro sport, because the rewards are so high. It can be quite a dark thing.
I'd agree with some of that. I definitely I watch less sport than I did on television, and yet I've probably been, I think this season I've missed 2 Burnley games.
Right.
So my passion for Burnley strong as ever. I'm probably going to go, even with all the fuss around Sky and the rest of it, I probably will go to the Tour de France this year, because I still think the Tour de France is one of the great events. If you think back through recent years, I don't know if you were around in London during the 2012 Olympics, but I think that was one of the best times to be alive. It was just incredible, the power, and the Paralympics, by the way. The Paralympics, which we went to a lot as well, was fantastic. So I agree with you about a lot of this. I think that, but I still think, you talk about the winner's book. I've found, talking to even these guys who are ruthless, cutthroat, totally driven, and what have you, there was something very, very special and very inspiring about them that I don't think we should dismiss lightly. I think that sport still gives us the capacity for the greatest highs, the greatest lows, the greatest sort of sense of well-being. I think it's partly my passion for sport as a spectator that has made me later in life become much more active physically myself. So I still get, I know, I totally understand why you say you feel your love affair with sport waning, and I feel it to some extent. But those bits of sport that I love, I probably love more than ever.
All right, let me pick up on a couple of things there. You say that it makes you feel great. As when you're in government, are you conscious when Olympic Games comes along, or the World Cups? If we do well, is that good for our economy? Is it good for how the people of the country are feeling, morale of the country?
You're sort of mildly conscious of it. I think, again, it's overstated.
But do you not sit there and discuss, like, we've got lottery funding, haven't we now? Which it was a long discussion on that, though, wasn't it? Because it was another, people were saying it was another tax for the public, wasn't it? Do you remember there was a lot of controversy?
Well, yeah, but it was John Major who brought the lottery in, and I think that there's no doubt our sporting success at the Olympic level has had a lot to do with that.
So some people will say we've bought our medals, but I think we've done it better than other countries because we're successful at buying our medals.
Yeah, we've invested in sport.
We've invested in
sport.
You can see Russia and some of the other countries
cheated.
Yeah, they're doing it that way. But obviously all nations think it's important.
Well, back in the old days, remember when the East German athletics was so strong, but I think that again, back to my diaries, but Euro 96, there was this sense that there's no doubt that the Tories thought this is maybe our last shot. And I can remember I can't say I'm proud of this, right? But there's a bit in my diaries where we went to the England-Germany game. Remember when Gaza nearly scored at the end? And why were they wearing those grey shirts anyway? And I've got to be upfront. I'm a massive Burnley fan, but when it comes to football, I'm a Scotland fan. Okay, so I wasn't that emotionally engaged, but I could feel it. And John Major was Prime Minister then. He was sitting just in front of us. I was actually sitting next to one of his protection guys, a few rows back, who was also Scottish.
Yeah.
And anyway, the game's over, and Tony actually said to me at one point after the game, John Major looked absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
He really did. And I remember Tony saying to me, he says, do you think you could just try until we get into the car not to look quite so happy? Anyway, so we got into the car, and I just went, I said, jetzt sind die Tories gefuckt, mein Kapitän.
I've just remembered something. I read an article that a really bad time to have a vote is after we've done badly in a
I think that's a myth, though.
International tournament.
I think it's one of those myths.
How did we get on? When was Brexit in comparison to the what was the last tournament we had?
2016, or the Olympics, where we did well. Oh no, before the Olympics, wasn't it? So.
What did we have?
Listen,
Euros. We had the Euros. It was, not great at all. Is that why? Is that when was that before or after Brexit?
It was May. May was Brexit. June the 23rd was the referendum.
Was it?
It was around the same time. You see, the fact we can't remember means it probably wasn't that big a deal. I think there's a mythology develops around this, but I do think the thing about that fortnight of the Olympics and then the Paralympics.
Oh, it's amazing.
I think that did have a really positive impact on the country.
Felt good about ourselves.
The worst thing about Brexit is it's the diametric opposite to that feeling.
Yeah, I want to get onto Brexit. But I'm going to get onto that in a minute. But
I'm not obsessed or anything.
You are, but do you know what? It's weird because we felt great. We loved our Olympians. Now we're doubting our Olympians because the news is coming in with doping allegations and stuff like that. That is what was the upsetting thing about sport at the moment. I did a panel the other day for a pilot show when I sat with all loads of sports people, and I won't name who they are because it's only a pilot. But I said to them, is it okay to cheat? And they went, it's okay to push the boundaries as far as you possibly can, by any means possible. And I went, is that cheating? And they went, well, sometimes you can tamper a bit. I was like, wow, but the rewards are so huge. You get one chance at a gold medal, you get one chance at getting a huge contract or whatever it is. That's where sport has gone, hasn't it? Or it's probably always been there.
I think, look, in what is sport about? Sport is about pushing yourself, your team, the technologies that are around you, innovation to the absolute limit.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really interesting interview recently. I've thought about this a lot. When there was yet another episode of Dele Alli being accused of diving. And Pochettino, the Spurs manager, did an interview, and he said, look, you've got to get this in proportion. You have to understand that competitive sport at this level, it's about tricking your opponent. I thought it was a really interesting thing. So like a winger trying to... Now, does that include tricking the referee? I would argue not. But at the same time, I think you say all these. I think we've got to be very careful about this. I was one of the ones. I totally fell for Lance Armstrong. I met him several times.
Did you?
Yeah, I interviewed him.
Horrible man.
And I liked him.
Yeah, but horrible what he did.
Well, and I liked him.
The way he bullied everybody.
I know, but
I never
saw that.
I've always thought that there must have been a stage where he's sitting there with his blood hanging on a wall, pump it at night, on the pumping blood. He must have thought this isn't right, but he just wanted to win, didn't he?
And he is an example. I don't know if you know this. The winner's book. There's 3 people who are in the book as winners.
Yeah,
but I've not put their names on the front cover with all the other winners.
Which are?
It's really interesting. This particularly what's going on now. One is Lance.
Yeah.
Because I interviewed him several times before, and I've spoken to him since as well. So I thought I'm going to keep him in the book because he's got so many interesting things to say about winning, but I'm not putting him on the front cover. Second one is the Queen,
right?
Because I thought it would look a bit weird having the Queen sandwiched between Diego Maradona and Michael Phelps.
Did you interview the Queen about winning?
No, the Queen is
she a winner? She was born into it.
The Queen is a total winner. The Queen is a total winner. And the reason I set her out as a winner, because the book sets out all the things I think you need to do to win.
Okay, right.
Strategy, leadership, adaptation, resilience, innovation. And in her own way, she's actually ticked virtually all these boxes. And the third one is Vladimir Putin. And the reason I had him in as a winner, and in fact I've written about this in the New European this week, is that I always say that the most important thing when you're involved in any organisation trying to win something big, you have to have a very clear sense of your objective and your strategy, and only then go tactical. And the point I made in the book, and this has been totally borne out by everything since, although he may be pushing. We've been saying Putin's going to push it too far, by the way, for the last decade.
Right.
Okay. His objective is the reassertion of Russian power. His strategy is the reassertion of Russian power, and his tactics are anything which reasserts Russian power. It's a strategy in a world where so many of our leaders are just not strategic.
So the big winner that you missed out of your book, the huge winner, Trump, who's just won at all costs.
No, he's I don't think he's a huge winner.
The biggest underdog to ever win anything, isn't he? He's
true.
He's got the keys to the free world. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but he's
done it by lying often.
Right. Well, that for true, and that I think actually you talked about earlier about pushing things to the limit.
Yeah,
that devalues his defeat. I don't think you can in politics. I actually when it's funny because I wrote the hardback, and then when the paperback, between the hardback and the paperback, you had Cameron winning an election and Corbyn becoming the leader of the Labour Party. So you have lots of people saying, right, you've got to put Cameron and Corbyn in now. And I said, no, Cameron I will not put in. And and this is not hindsight because I wrote it in the hardback. Cameron's problem is he always confuses strategy and tactics. That is why we had the referendum. That is why we're coming out of the European Union.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
Right? And Jeremy Corbyn, yes, he won the leadership of the Labour Party twice, but if you're in politics at that level, you only become a winner if you win several elections and you make a lot of change. Trump, let's just see where it goes. Let's see where it goes. But I would not put Trump in a book about winning at the moment. Because I think...
Why? You've got to.
No, I don't think
no one thought he was going to win,
That's a different point. That's a different point.
The guy's leader of the United States of America.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
He was a reality star.
Yes, exactly. And so it says a lot about the world and the way the world has changed. But if I look at the people if I look at the politicians I've written about in the book, Mandela, Clinton, Obama, I think winning Merkel, I think winning at the political level is about winning, and then it's about what you do. It's not just about winning elections. And so let's just see what happens with Trump. But I wouldn't, if I was redoing Trump, the winners book now, I wouldn't have Trump as one of my big winners. I really wouldn't.
Okay. So what defines a winner then for you?
Well, you have to decide that. I mean, for example, if you or I are going to do the marathon, for example, we would not win the marathon, right? The London Marathon. But if we set ourselves a target of, say, 4 hours, get under 4 hours, and we did that, we've won by our standards. If you look at the Premier League this year, okay, Manchester City are going to win it. They're winners. Burnley, who everybody predicted were going to get relegated. We're currently 7th. There's no chance we're going to go down. We have won this season, okay? So it's not just black and white. It's not just results. And I think the other thing, you talked about sport. I think long-term, the values at the heart of what you do are very, very important as well. That's the other reason why I couldn't put Trump down as a winner.
Okay.
He's technically a winner because he won an election. But look at what's happening. Look at what's happened to his ratings since.
One of your the varying reviews on that, aren't they? Are they diminishing now rapidly?
He's got the lowest rating of any president in history at this stage of his presidency. Now,
will he get back in though?
He might get back in.
Yeah, he might. And then,
will
he be a winner if he gets in twice?
Well, he'd win 2 terms, and let's see after 8 years.
You just don't want to stick him in.
After 8 years.
I think everyone's sitting listening to this go, we think he won. Let's talk about Sir Alex Ferguson. That's a good one. You like him, don't you?
Well, he's a winner, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so one interesting thing about Sir Alex Ferguson that I think is what he did was absolutely remarkable. What I didn't like what he did was the pressure he always put on the referees and the officials. He always did it in his post-match interviews, his pre-match interviews. Jose Mourinho does that a lot as well. I think that is pushing the bound. I think that's slightly cheating, and I think it's unfair on the officials who are getting paid nothing in comparison to that lot. Where does that cross a line for you in your winners book? Or does it?
I haven't written about referees, but that whole thing about officials is really interesting. So at Burnley, I sit just behind our bench, and I love watching the managers. I love watching them. You get a sense of their characters and their personality. I know Sean Dyche, our manager, really well.
Yeah, he's a good guy, I know.
Fabulous bloke. And one of the things is, if you watch Sean's interviews, he doesn't slag off refs. He doesn't do that thing that some of the other managers do, but he's at the fourth official the whole time.
Right.
Now, he would say, and I think he's justified in saying, the fourth official is the only means by which, during the game, he might be able to have some sense of influence over decisions that have taken place as a way possibly of influencing decisions for the rest of the game. That being said, you will not see our players diving. You will not see... but then there might be a consequence of that. I think we and Swansea are the only clubs this season not to have had a penalty.
Yeah.
At all, not one.
But I think
I prefer the Sean Dyche way.
So do I, and I think all fans do, and I think we're being cheated. The fans, this is what I think. I mean, I remember Didier Drogba at Chelsea, who's such a great player for us, but I used to just find it so boring.
You must have been hurt. You must have been hurt this week when he said that Marseille was the greatest club he ever played for.
Did he say that?
Yeah, he said this is the club that's in my heart.
I always hated him, Alastair. But I used to really struggle watching him go down every week. I was like, oh God, it was like watching American football. We just get territory. Watching Ronaldo sometimes is like that. Go down, get up, go 5 yards, go down, get up. It's like, it was so boring.
Yeah.
And I said it a few times and got criticised by Chelsea fans, but it was like, Christ, stop diving. Get rid of him.
Yeah.
You know, it's boring. Yeah. But I think as fans, we've got to start this winning ugly thing. I think gets a bit boring after a while. Winning ugly at all costs.
Okay.
No, you're winning to your strengths. It's different.
Right. Okay. No, I agree. In general, I agree with you about that. I think that, and I do think that I tell you the thing I find amazing. You talk about referees. I reckon, this VAR thing, which they seem to have cocked up in spades, but I'll tell you what I think would make a difference and would add to the spectacle is if they took from rugby the thing about the microphone and the camera on the referee.
And put it on the screen, but they're worried about violence, aren't they? Which is always...
Well, I think that...
That's what they're worried about.
Well, I was at West Ham Burnley last week, so saw a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But I do think that thing about... the thing that strikes me as absolutely extraordinary about the referee is the abuse they have to endure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So when you've got the managers doing it as well, because Cloughy, for instance, would never criticise a ref, would he ever? That was his thing. Martin O'Neill doesn't do it either, does he? That's their old school, and that's what they think. Some of the other guys, as I say, Sir Alex has done it, Jose Mourinho does it. I'm just not sure that's what we want, really.
No, I think you're probably right, and I think that. But this thing about winning at all costs. I mean, I'll tell you the thing that Lance Armstrong said that should have alerted me.
Go on.
But I was so impressed by what he said when he said it. This is the first time I'd ever interviewed him. It was for the Times, not long after I left Number 10. And he was about to do his 5th Tour de France win.
Yeah.
Okay. And his big rival at the time, I don't even remember, there's a German guy called Jan Ullrich. He was like the big Armstrong rival. And I said to Armstrong, so when you had cancer, were you scared of dying? He said, oh yeah, I was scared. I was scared I was going to die. I said, right, here we are. You're about to leave. He was in Spain doing his training. You're about to leave here and the tour's going to start. Ulrich's your main rival. He's scared of losing. He said, yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared of Ulrich. I said, of those two fears, which is the greater? Cancer or losing this race? He said, he actually reminded me at this point, his eyes reminded me of Roy Keane, right?
Yeah.
It was the death stare. And he just said, losing and dying, it's the same thing.
So, yeah.
And I went, wow, headline, love it.
Yeah.
This is my guy. And of course, what I should have thought, right, okay, so you really are a cheat then. Because you would do absolutely anything to stay alive and you'd do anything to win. But I didn't think that. I thought, wow, this guy's amazing. So maybe I was a bit naive. And I think we all do this. This is back to the start of the conversation.
Yeah.
You have to challenge what you think and how you think. I think sometimes it's like with Burnley. I want to believe that Burnley players are great guys.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, I'm not going to say who it was. I bumped into one of them at a railway station recently, and I thought, oh, God, is he really a Burnley player? it's like, so, but you want to believe they're good.
But with every winner, there's losers. If someone wins, someone's got to lose. And
right, well, so do you remember Jan Ullrich?
Yeah.
Do you remember him?
Oh, no.
Exactly.
No.
So...
Yeah,
there's a great cyclist and we don't remember him.
Exactly. With every winner there comes losers. And interesting, it's a good way of moving on to mental health, because I've spent a lot of time around sportsmen and a lot of time around them. When they get injured, they get sad, they get sometimes depressed when their career's finished. They get depressed because it defines them and stuff. That win at all costs culture creates a lot of demons for people, doesn't it? There's a lot of sacrifices they have to make as well, and they have to become very singular, very self-obsessed. It's not that. It's funny because I talk to parents sometimes, and they go, "Oh, my kid's really good at tennis or really good football." I think, football's maybe not so bad, but individual sports definitely. You think, "Oh Christ, they're on quite a mission there mentally." Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. When I think one of the reasons I like sport so much, and it's funny. I did a thing at Cheltenham Festival a few years ago with Paddy Keelty, and he was interviewing me. And the idea, I think they were testing it as a pilot for a TV program. And the idea was that you give the guy who's interviewing you, you give them your phone.
Yeah.
And then he goes through your phone and they base the interview around your contacts book. Right. So he would go, "Oh God, Dave, there's Lance Armstrong, there's Alex Ferguson, there's Tony Blair." And then, so that was the thing. What he noticed as he went through my phone book, he actually said at one point, he says, "This is amazing. You've got more football people in here than you've got politics." And I think one of the reasons it's not just that I love sport, I definitely made a lot of connections with people at different levels of sport when I left Downing Street. And I started to, and particularly during the Winners' Book and also the series I did for the Times on great sportsmen and women, there was a similarity in the impact on me after I left Number 10 to what they were describing after they'd left top-level sport.
Yeah.
And the difficulty of replacing something that has been all-consuming and that you felt has given you purpose and meaning and status and respect and all this stuff that goes with that, and then suddenly it goes. And I think in sport, for a lot of people, back to this thing about, what do we expect from our sportsmen and women? Most of them, like the kid that you mentioned that say may be good at tennis at 11, if that becomes their life, that is their life, right? A young footballer, there's somebody like Wayne Rooney. Wayne Rooney probably knew from a very early age, this is what I am, okay? And then he goes on. He probably didn't know that he was going to be quite as good as he was and become quite as big a name as he has. But then he becomes that person in his teens, makes his debut at 16.
Yeah.
And then by the time he's 20 and he's like an established household name, and we're treating him like he's, we're expecting of him the same things that we expect of politicians and doctors and priests and teachers, ambassadors. It's a nonsense. Mm-hmm. So I think that they then go through their life. They have to adapt to it. And, it's all very well for people to say, "Oh, yeah, well, they're multimillionaires and they've got this and they've got that and they've got the rest of it." But, Beatles, money doesn't buy you love and all that. They don't necessarily have happiness, and they don't necessarily have the tools to know how to build happiness in their lives. So I think I think a lot of people, when they give up that meaning and purpose, I think their lives can become very difficult and very messy.
So your depression was prior to you leaving Number 10, though, wasn't it?
I think I've probably had depression all my adult life, on and off.
You? Right.
Yeah, I think so. I had and it came to a head. I had a breakdown in the 80s, and that's when I realised I was ill. And then since then, I've had it on and off.
Why do you have it? Is it a chemical imbalance or is it thought processes?
No idea.
No idea. Do you go and see therapists?
I do. I've seen loads of people. The guy that I see now, I've been seeing him for 13 years. The pills that I'm on now, I've been on them for nearly 4 years. They seem to be doing quite good.
Right.
But I've just finished a documentary I'm making for the BBC looking at different ways of treating depression. I don't know is the answer. I've come to learn I've learned to live with it. I've come to appreciate it a bit.
Yeah. I've suffered from depression, and I don't talk about it a lot, but I don't want to be the I don't know. It's a lot of celebrities talk about it, don't they?
Well, actually, not that many,
Do you think?
No, I really don't.
There's quite a lot of. We'll talk about your campaigns and stuff in a minute, but there's quite a lot of people talking about it at the moment, and I was thinking to myself, what is it that people don't understand about depression? What could I talk to you about? And I think the real thing that I think people don't understand when they're looking at someone with depression is how painful it is. The pain. And it's so indescribable, but it hurts to be depressed. And I think people just think, oh, you're a little bit sad. But it does really hurt, doesn't it? You sit there and it's not a physical pain, but it's a sort of, I can't really describe it, but the pain is excruciating when you wake up and you go, oh, I don't want to be alive and I don't want to be awake today.
It is a pain, and I think I sometimes actually do feel it physically.
Right.
I feel like my whole body's been sort of taken over by a horrible deadness and a heavy weight. But I tell you what's interesting is that this, like for me, one of the things I think rely on to help me through it is words. I write, I think people sort of say, God, how do you get time to write all these books? But I feel I have to. It's like, and this is the first of my 4 novels. This is the first one that isn't really about mental health. And the first one, All in the Mind, I think I've got no doubt at all, that was a kind of a major therapeutic experience for me.
Yeah.
And there's one scene in it where there's one of the characters called David. The story is it's about a psychiatrist, and it's about his relationship with his patients. And as the novel progresses, it becomes clear he's iller than any of them. And it's got a pretty sad ending. That's all I'll say. But David, this patient of his, I describe his depressions. Now, he's not me, but anybody who's had depression, as you say, it's so hard to explain what it's like. And
so hard.
I have found it easier to explain it through other people.
Oh, that's good.
And so, anyway, one of the best emails I've ever had in my life, it was from Charlie Faulkner, who was Lord Chancellor in one of Tony Blair's governments, and who's a very good friend of mine. And Charlie, who's one of the happiest blokes you'll ever meet, and he sent me an email saying, I've just read All in the Mind. He said, I think it's the first time I've ever understood what it must be like. Now, I could have talked to him.
Yeah, that's great.
But he'd seen that. And I think, you talk about the campaigning stuff we're doing for Time to Change and these guys. Some of the best, most moving, most effective, change-effecting moments in the campaign have actually been in soap operas.
Right.
Where a character in a soap is portraying an illness in a way that is like, wow. I'll give you another example. Claire Danes in Homeland.
Yeah.
Anybody who's ever had hypomania, she does it really, really well. And that can help.
What's hypomania?
Hypomania, manic to the ultimate extreme.
Yeah, I've been
and so I think, and it's interesting you say lots of people are doing this. I go to so many events talking about mental health, and it's the same handful of us trot it out again and again and again. I wish there were more. So Tim, I think you should do more. It's your responsibility to the nation.
Don't put pressure on me. I met someone who changed my mind dramatically, a therapist, and who said to me, I said, I'm depressed, and he said, I was paying him, by the way. I sat for a session, and he said, depression's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It means you need to change your life. And it sounds a bizarre thing to say, but that's when I started analysing winning. That's when I started analysing all this stuff and started thinking, hold on, what am I doing? I was so competitive. I'm trying not to be now. I'm struggling. But the whole of my life, I've been taught win, go and get it, and I don't think it works for me. I don't think that helps me. I also started analysing how I was feeling by looking at people criticising me on Twitter, and my natural reaction to it always being a bit of a lad or something, going, well, I don't care, and then suddenly going, actually, it does really hurt me. I'm quite a sensitive soul, and I'm not thick-skinned. I have Will Storr on here, a journalist who wrote the book Selfie, about self-esteem movement and how Thatcher and Reagan loved the self-esteem movement. We were all told to be different and special and all that sort of stuff. It's possibly why I'm the kid of the 80s, so I ended up on television, but it's also why I'm broken as well, I think. I don't know, it's work in progress. But I analyse everything, and I thought the idea that it wasn't a bad thing, it meant my life had to change, my thought processes had to change, meant I could do something about it. So he gave me the energy to go, yeah, brilliant, I can actually one day get through this and do something. What advice would you have for somebody who's suffering from depression listening to this at the moment?
I think it's very hard to give advice to generally, because I think every single person I've ever met who's talked to me about having depression, I see the similarities, but I also know there are differences.
Yes.
So, for example, in this, without giving away too much about this documentary I've just made, there's a guy that I talked to in it who's, it's a life so different to mine, experiences so much worse than mine. And yet there are people who will have had lives as bad as he has had who won't get depression. And so the first thing I'd say is don't even think about your surroundings. There are multi-millionaires who get depression.
Yeah, definitely.
There are people like me, with the nicest families you could ever want, who get depression.
Mm-hmm.
So try to work out where it's coming from. Now, Fiona, my partner, she thinks I don't go deep enough to try to work it out. She thinks I'm too prone to going to see my shrink and saying, look, should we up the dose a bit? But I think what I'd say is it's horrible. I always say, I just said to you, you should be out there. I don't actually say that to people. What I say to them is it's always benefited me to be open. I've always felt better talking about it. And that could be talking about it to you. It could be talking about it to a doctor. It could be, and this happens to me a lot.
I think that talk about it. I'll
tell you what happens to me a lot is just being out and about. The number of people who know that I talk about this, who will come and sit next to me on a train or on out and about and just say, they'll talk about it. And they'll often say to me, it really helps when I hear you talking about this on the radio or the telly or whatever. And I will say, honestly, I've got to say it also helps me. And it's not just that I like the fact, and I do like the fact that people say it makes a difference. I do like that. Because, you were talking earlier about argument. One of the things I like about argument is the ability to change the way people think. I do like the fact that there's this big campaign going on to change the way we think about mental illness. I like being involved in that. But I think that the other thing I'd say to people is that, look, suicide is now the biggest killer of young men in Britain. Something going on that's really, really bad. But for most people, for most depressions, you'll get through it. You'll get through it. And I always try, when I have got through one, I always try to learn something from it and to try and build it into resilience. So your guy saying to you, your depression is not necessarily a bad thing, you can change your life. I know where it's coming from. And I think a lot of my creativity comes from my depression.
Do you know, yeah, you have to be truthful with yourself as well, though. And I think that's one of the big things with depression is if you decide you're got a problem with alcohol or drugs or something, when you cure yourself is by realizing you've got a problem with it. And when you've got depression, you've got to go, right, there are certain things that are not working for me. And now I don't know enough about chemical imbalance in depression, but for thought processes, which is what I think I suffer from, it's just going, my thought process, my laws on life don't work. But I've got to be honest with them and think them through. And I think reading for me also helps a lot. I just don't stop reading. That's why I started this podcast, by the way. I just kept reading self-help books non-stop, and then I thought, well, I'll start doing it. I know enough about it. So I started as an agony aunt, and then I started just getting really interesting people on to talk about it all. And I've learnt masses by listening to people talk about these issues, and I think we're going in the right direction for people, but I do understand that with men it's very tough to admit that you've got depression.
I don't know why though. I don't know why, and I think that's why
because we're not winners.
No, but I don't listen.
We're not winners if we're depressed.
But you see, I think it's the reason why the Time to Change people quite like having me out there as one of their kind of main ambassadors, is that if I go along to an audience, most people don't think I'm weak. They don't think I'm not tough. They don't think I'm not resilient. So, and yet, I think one of the things that makes me strong is the resilience I've developed through having had mental illness. And one of the things that has given me that resilience, I think, is the fact that I've been out there talking about it for years. And it's made me feel better. So I think it's, look, these are cultural ingrained things that take years and years to... My big worry at the moment is actually that we're winning the battle on attitudes, but we're not winning the battle on services. That's my big worry. It's
a good book to read, that, actually, Will Storr, Selfie, because he talks about how all the things, society, what we're telling men and also women, how we should be. You know, it doesn't actually work, and so we're getting quite confused. And I think it's creating depression's on the rise, sadly. So and I think suicide is as well.
Well, I had a argument with Piers Morgan the other day, because he was sort of saying that he's worried that the more we talk about it, the more the people think they've got it. Like, you know, all these girls who keep saying they've got anxiety, you know, why didn't they have it before when we weren't talking about it? And I think actually for young people, there is a change. I don't know what it is, but people say it's social media. I don't know if it is or it isn't. But there's definitely something going on that is making young men feel very depressed, and a lot of young girls feel very, very anxious.
But we have to be careful that we don't create victim culture, because that's not healthy either. You can't wear, as Paul Maguire says, who wrote the book Sumo, you can't wear a victim t-shirt. So you can't say I'm a victim all the time. Now that's slightly different from what I think you're saying, but you need yourself to go take responsibility and accept your life. You know?
For sure. And I you see, I think that for me, I think I've definitely developed strategies that work for me.
Yeah.
Both to avoid depression and when I get depression, to get through it.
Yeah. It's horrible when you feel it coming on, isn't it? It's really...
No, it's the worst feeling in the world.
It's terrible. It really is. Right. You are going to go later and discuss Brexit, so I'll give you a practice now. I'll give you a warm up.
Okay, go on.
who you gonna discuss it with later?
Oh, one of the arch Brexiteers.
Which one?
Hannon.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to give you a warm up. This is like your full European warm up I'm giving you. So let's start with this, because your book is about IRA as well. You tweeted the other day: hard border equals hard border, soft border equals hard border, no Brexit equals Good Friday peace agreement can stay good. Obviously, something you were involved in, the Good Friday peace agreement. That is the real massive worry at the moment, isn't it? How worried are you about Northern Ireland?
Genuinely and seriously, and I think that one of the worst things about this Brexit debate is that the people, I mean, the referendum itself was awful on both sides, but I think since the Brexiteers won, the worst thing has been this inability actually to focus upon real, genuine problems. Their strategy is just to sort of dismiss it. I think it's a genuine worry. And the thing is that and also it's not just a bilateral issue. The British government is talking as though they can sort this out with the Irish. This will be, if we leave, the UK border with the only land border with the rest of the European Union.
If we leave, you think
I'm still an if man. I'm still an if man.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I know I'm in the minority, but I think that I still think.
Do you think EU is working though?
Well, is it perfect? No. Has it been a really big part of several decades of relative peace and relative prosperity? Definitely. Is the single market a pretty extraordinary economic and cultural achievement? Definitely. Have we got more as a country from our close relations at every level? I think so. So I think it's funny. I'm actually looking back in, when I was working for Tony Blair, I was much more Eurosceptic than he was. I wasn't a big fan of the euro, but since this whole thing has come to a head with the referendum, I'm really, really worried about what we're going to lose. And it's not just about the economy, although that's a massive thing. And even the government's own impact assessment papers say that out in the single market, the sort of Norway model, we're losing almost 2% of the economy. Free trade agreement, the Canada model, almost 5%. And if we go out on WTO, World Trade Organization rules, you're into the sort of 7-8%. I mean, it's a massive act of self-harm. And their own papers say that these other trade deals, little sign of which thus far, by the way, these other trade deals with countries like the States and India and New Zealand and Australia and all these other places they talk about, is going to add less than 1% to our economy.
I see Unilever today have gone to Holland rather than UK.
Well, they say that's not entirely to do with Brexit, but I'd be very, very surprised if it wasn't part of it.
Do you agree with anything Boris or Nigel Farage say?
Depends what they're talking about.
About Europe, though, do you agree with any of it?
Not really.
No.
I think I do agree with some of it. I understand the feelings of a kind of rather distant bureaucracy, but the reason I can't respect Boris Johnson on any level because I do think he's a liar. He was a liar as a journalist. I mean, he was part of that right-wing Brussels Telegraph clique that started all the bent banana stories and all the kind of, Brussels is this terrible thing that's being done to us. He lied during the campaign. I think he's a joke as a foreign secretary. I think Farage has got a set of beliefs, but I think he hides them. I think the people who are driving this Brexit now, for me, are very, very, very right-wing. The Rees Moggs of this world, they're very, very right-wing. And I don't think the country voted to be poorer. I don't think we voted to be weaker. We certainly didn't vote to put the Good Friday Agreement under threat. I don't think that we voted for this massive exit bill. We voted for more money for the health service, not less. So I don't see any good way out of this. And
they sold a good dream, though. Sovereignty, the authority of a state to govern itself. It's attractive, isn't it?
Yeah, but we had that. Theresa May said that in her own white paper. We have never not been in control of our own sovereignty. To make international. People don't say we. Okay, but do people say we lose sovereignty by being part of NATO?
No, but
particularly now.
Right, whose fault is this though? Because the British public, I watch Question Time a lot, and it's the people want Brexit, and the ones who voted for it are angry that people are saying they're stupid and don't know what they're doing.
I'm not saying they're stupid.
No, I know you're not, but people are saying that, and they feel that, and the British public felt they were losing power, whether you agree with it or not. That's how they felt, and they wanted their power back. That's a bad PR job from Conservatives and Labour and everyone in power throughout the years.
That's why I said to you earlier that the influence that the right wing media has had for me that's been of impact has been this. Right. I think that Europe is an issue about which most of our media doesn't really understand, doesn't care, lies about it. But so. If you I think the Brexit decision is less about Europe than the consequences of the crash, and I think it's a lot of people feeling that the world, the economy is not working for them. So when David Cameron stood up at the referendum and said, "Listen, if we leave, it's going to really damage your living standards, and we're going to destroy this wonderful economy we've got," lots of people thought, "What world are you in? This is not my world. My living standards are already falling. My kids already can't afford a house. My kids, I don't dare put them into college." So that is, I think, and this is the disaster of referendums, is that they become gigantic protest votes. And you're right, people are angry, but I still think they're angry about the causes as opposed to about the European Union.
We're not alone in Europe, though, are we? With the 51% voted out? The 51% voted out. If you go to a lot of countries in Europe, they're feeling the same. Of
course they are.
I've got a friend who's in Rome, and she keeps saying, "I wish we could have a Brexit as well. We've got no hope."
Right.
So every country.
Those two statements are not, in my view, totally related.
So I said,
in other words, they have no hope, but leaving the European Union is not the way to get it.
I said to her, "What would happen if you leave? What do you think?" She goes, "We'd have change, and then we could basically." She did the sovereignty argument and said we could be Italian again, and so
mean?
Yes, but that's why I'm saying Europe have done a terrible PR job all over Europe to not go, actually, you're getting benefit out of this.
Yeah, but it's very hard to do that if you've had this.
Should be the only thing. You invented New Labour. It was the thing which told us what we were getting.
Yeah, listen,
as Europe, you need to be the guys going, your benefits of being in this are huge. But you're saying that the public of the 51% didn't think.
Yeah, the reason for that, what I'm saying is that the reason for that, I think, is less to do with Europe than to do with the consequence of the crash. Added to and underpinned by this steady drumbeat of anti-Europeanism. And this idea that we've never really been fully part of it.
But was Europe moving towards their own national anthem, their own army, was it moving that way? Was it that those sort of things which are being fed to us that we were going to lose our sovereignty all the time?
You certainly told lies about that. Look, so for example, there is, and Tony Blair was a big part of this, there is the development of a common European security and defence policy. That is a good idea. Yeah. You look at what's going on with Russia at the moment, it is a good idea if the countries of Western Europe can be a bit more cooperative on defence. It is a bad idea that NATO is so heavily reliant upon America, particularly with Trump there. So this idea, but what the Brexit extremists will say, that's all about creating a European army. And they tell these lies about, we're going to lose all the regiments. The regiments that we've lost because of British government decisions, not because of Europe. And then it's, you get into a situation again to look at what's going on with the Russians now, and the style of leadership that Putin is sort of bringing to the world. Erdogan, something similar down in Turkey. What was Boris Johnson saying during the referendum? That if we stay in the European Union, tens of millions of Turks are going to come and live in the UK. A lie, straightforward lying. What's the first thing he does after he's appointed Foreign Secretary? Go to Turkey and say that we support their accession to the EU. And I think the reason why I say if, by the way, and I realise it's a small if, is because I think there's going to come a point where the British public realise that this is not what they voted for. They certainly didn't vote for that massive exit bill. They didn't vote to get poorer. They didn't vote for a far smaller economy, which is what they're going to get. Are we really going to put our trust in the team that is in charge of these negotiations, which they're handling so badly? So I think when she
what do you think? So what do you think will happen then? How will it reverse?
I really don't know. But that worries me because the thing what you expect from government is to give you a sense of where it's going. We're in this ridiculous situation where we have a prime minister. I'm sorry, we've got a prime minister who, in her heart, and a chancellor who, in his heart, knows this is going to damage Britain. They know that.
Yeah, she's Remain, isn't she? Yeah, she was definitely Remain.
She's Remain. Yeah. I mean, there's not a serious analysis being done that doesn't tell us this is going to make us poorer. She said that last week. She said, we are going to have less access to each other's markets. Now that's going to make us poorer.
My when the vote was coming around, my big issue with it was that I know who my local MP is. I take an interest. I have no idea about who my MEP is or what's going on in Europe. That worries me a bit, that we're so far removed from it. I keep on saying on this podcast, people laugh at me, but I don't trust humans in power particularly. I'm not sure they're great bedfellows. But
you know what robots do, do you?
No, well,
do you?
My idea in politics. Do you want to hear my view on politics? I think you should. I think you should be rewarded for the less power you have. So if you're given a job in, the defence, the less power you manage to have by running your department, the more money you get. Because I think depowering you, otherwise you're attracting someone who wants the power. You're looking like I'm mental.
No,
you know that theory. You know that theory that you've got. Well, I always say this. I said it to Harriet Harman. I hate the fact that Tony Blair or Theresa May or whoever stand up and they go, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this with taxes. I'm going to do that rather than we. I want to know it's a team. Yeah. And so that annoys me slightly. And I think.
So basically, Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi should earn a lot less than people who play for Port Vale.
Yeah, the guy at the back of the queue. Do you know, once I was talking to someone who was involved in the Premier League, and I said to them, I think a really good idea is if you either pay them all the same, or you pay the team who comes last the most. And they went, why would they play? And I said, because they want to win the match. And they were like, you can't do it like that. You can't do it. So,
listen,
I'm a socialist. That's what I am.
Right, okay. But you need to put this
You're
in
a capitalist.
When you go into the Sunday brunch studio this Sunday,
I want to pay less.
You want to give all your money to the makeup girl, the cleaners, the one who brings you the tea.
Depower politicians anyway. It's the theory you pay the person at the back of the queue more than the person at the front of the queue, then the queue never forms. That sort of thing. I think there's something in politics to...
Well, listen, we definitely need radical change in this world, Tim. So, get it out there. Push it. What was I going to say to you? Are we attracting the right people into politics, do you think, at the moment? No, we're not. But that's, we can't blame them for that. We have to look at ourselves. And we have to say, I'll tell you something I do, particularly with business audiences these days. I'll invariably, if you're doing a Q&A, so it will come up, why have we got such crap politicians? And I will challenge the audience, say, well, hands up here, anybody who's ever thought of doing it. And very few hands go up because the money's not great.
And the abuse
is horrible.
Get, yeah. Why don't you do it?
I feel I've done my bit in the way I did it.
Yeah. Who's the door? That'll be your card. Can you just give me 2 more minutes? Because I've got another couple. All right, just quickly going back to the EU very quickly, because I just thought, do you think all the countries like each other?
No. They have differences. Our cultures are different, but like within regions, would you say the Scots all like the English all like the Scots, do the Welsh all like the Northern Irish? I mean, we have differences, but the question is, across the European Union, do we have a lot more in common?
Yeah.
And I think we do.
Are we equal partners? No,
No.
because in Britain we are. Scotland, hopefully, Northern Ireland, Wales.
No way is Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland equal partners.
Well, that's awful.
Look, of course it is. Look at what's happening with the Brexit argument at the moment. Nicola Sturgeon and Carolyn Jones from Wales, they were in Seeing Trees in May yesterday. Of course, they're worried about that post-Brexit, there's going to be a grab of a lot of the powers that should be being devolved. So, no, they're not equal partners. And likewise, look, politics is a combination of system and, if you like, a reality. The most powerful country in the European Union is Germany. That's a fact. Now, one of the Macron becoming president has made France more powerful. Brexit, I'm afraid, is making us less powerful in the world.
Why are Germany the most powerful?
Because they're the biggest, because they're the richest, because in many ways they're the most successful, and also because they've got the most respected leader.
Are we looking after Greece, Spain, Italy, all the countries which aren't doing well though? As the European Union, are we looking after them, or are they just going to sit at the bottom of the pile? Are they Burnley?
Well, let me just point out. Actually, Burnley is sitting. We're
Right,
kind of where the UK is.
So you're saying Sean Dyche for Prime Minister?
I'm saying he's a proper leader. I think that look, Greece. I totally understand why the Greeks feel let down by their own governments, successive, and also by the European Union. But I think that goes back to earlier decisions that were made about where, and this is one of the reasons why I wasn't that big a fan of the euro, where currencies that frankly weren't ready for membership of the euro were crammed into it. Where the politics and the politics did supersede the economics. I do believe that. But I think that there's no political institution in the world that is perfect. The United States is not perfect. China is far from perfect. India is far from perfect. The European Union is far from perfect. But I think if you look at it in the grand scheme of things about what it's achieved and what it's done for peace and prosperity. And I'll tell you something Nick Clegg's wife, Miriam, said to me a while back. I interviewed her for GQ. And she said something that I thought was really important. She said, no country in the world has ever built success by governing against the interests of young people. And I think that's absolutely right. And our young people, we're going about freedom of movement. I was talking to one of my daughter's friends the other day who's obsessed about it. She's even worse than I am. And she said, they go on about freedom of movement, but as if it's all one way. We're going to stop people coming here. Well, they're stopping me going there. She said she had a German boyfriend. She speaks Italian. She wants to go and work in the European Union. Where's her freedom of movement gone? So I think for the next generation, they are going to spend a lot of their time and energy undoing the damage that we're in the process of doing.
I could discuss this with you forever, but your car's here. Hopefully I've warmed you up sufficiently. Can I just ask you my
you've got some quick fires,
couple of quick questions? Yeah. What one piece of advice would you like to give our listeners that has been invaluable to your life?
Always try to get good out of bad.
Okay.
Turn setback into opportunity.
All right. That's good. What mistake do people make? Maybe doing your job or anything else?
What mistake?
What mistakes do people make? Maybe doing your job or something else. What mistakes are people making?
People generally?
Yeah, anything.
I think there's a real danger that we are becoming more and more short-termist in our thinking because of the pressures of noise around us all the time. You see it in politics, you see it in business, you see it in charities, you see it in... So I think, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody. As soon as I walk through your door and get in the back of the car, I'll be looking at, email, social media, blah, 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 the news. And I think resisting those pressures is not a bad thing to try to do.
Actually, I do think in the last election I was desperate for one of the politicians to come out and start talking about the future as in technology and stuff because it's changing. And I didn't see that.
No. The last election was two visions of the past.
I felt that sometimes.
Do you want 50s or 70s?
Okay, I did feel that sometimes.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of politicians.
Did any of them mention robotics?
No,
artificial intelligence,
none of them, and they didn't mention
Jobs of the future.
and global politics as well. That we were very insular in the last election, and then a few of them were talking about social media and mobile phones, and a couple of major politicians, I won't mention them right now, they were going, I don't have a smartphone. I'm like, Jesus Christ, you're trying to run the country. We're all changing dramatically, and it's like, yeah. Anyway, any life hacks? They could be travel tips or life hacks. Hacks, yeah.
What's a hack? I thought a hack was a journalist.
We'll leave it there. Come on. Any books you recommend, apart from your own?
Books. Are you on your self-help kick again?
Yeah, go on, do that. Anything, yeah. Is there a good one on that front?
I read a very... Oh, God, it was quite depressing, but... I read a wonderful book recently by a woman called Paula Bell. I think it's called Chasing the Rainbow. And it's about her husband who killed himself.
Right.
And I think it'd be interesting for people to... Because what we're talking about earlier about, people who live with people who are feeling depressed, it's very, very hard for them. So I think it was an interesting... that perspective, because I see this in Fiona, my partner, that it's only when she realised and was able to realise that my depression was not her fault.
Yes.
Because I think often people who are living with people who are depressed, they think it must be something I'm doing. So I think that was a really interesting perspective from that book. Best book about politics ever written, in my view, is Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin, which is about Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
And my favourite novel ever is Madame Bovary by Flaubert.
Okay. What is the meaning of life?
I don't think we know until we're near the end. And I think that is an atheist way of staying broadly on track. So, yeah. I think the purpose of life is... I don't believe happiness is the purpose of life. I don't believe wealth is the purpose of life. I think we should keep pursuing progress. Can
I ask you one more very quick question, because it's something that bugged me, and I talked to Reverend Richard Coles on here about religion and politics. The weapons of mass destruction and all that sort of stuff. When Tony Blair discussed it, he said, "Let my God judge me." It bugged me that, because I don't have his God. I don't have a religion. Religion and politics, they seem so intertwined. Theresa May, Trump, Barack Obama, everyone quotes God all the time. I find it very frustrating. It's like, I've got God on my side, so I can do no wrong.
I don't think our politicians quote God very much at all. I think they're very, very wary. And, I'm one of my most quoted sound bites is when I said to a journalist, "We don't do God." And it was a way of shutting him up, because he was trying to get Tony Blair to talk about God.
Right.
Now, but I think, you see, on the one hand, people say they want authenticity from their politicians. Now, Tony he's a big believer.
Right.
Right. I don't know about Theresa May. I know she goes to church every week, but I don't know the extent and depth of her faith. But I share your worry. I think when politicians talk about their faith, there's always the danger that people think they're allying that to their politics, and I think that's a risk. But I think I think politicians should express themselves in whatever way they want. But also, I must say, I mean, look, Neil Kinnock is an atheist. Neil Kinnock's one of the greatest orators we've had, and he regularly would kind of plunder the Bible for great thoughts and great insights and great lines. I don't have any problem with that, any more than, I think if you make it a speech and it's struggling a bit, you're never going to fail by digging out something from Shakespeare.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with people talking about God and talking about their faith. I have a problem if they start to say, "And that's why you should trust me, and that's why I'm right and the other guy's wrong."
Yeah, which is what Bush did a bit, I think. Anyway, listen, thank you so much for coming on this. If people want to contact you, what's your address on Twitter?
@CampbellClaret.
Okay.
And I think I'm on Instagram as well, but I'm not very good at Instagram.
And your book, Bloody Saturday, is out now. Thank you so much. I could talk to you all morning. So, and good luck with your Brexit.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you don't need it, do you? You know what you're doing. All right. Thanks, Alastair.
Thanks.
So the idea is, Mark.
Oh no, don't do it again. We've just heard it.
You reward politicians
It was bad.
by not letting them have power. So they can't run riot with the power. That's how you reward them. You reward them by getting a system in place that they don't make the final decision. They have processes, and that's how you reward
I'm going to have to find another podcast host to put my.
Come on,
to
you know it
put
makes
my,
sense.
Put my vote to.
You know it's because it gets
No,
away
because
it's rubbish. But it does move it away from the sort of the great world leaders who are not necessarily great. We're looking at quite a lot of them at the moment. You've got Putin, you've got Kim Jong-un, you've got Donald Trump. You've got loads of these guys at the moment. If they had to depower themselves to get rewarded.
Anyways, that was a great interview. That was a really great interview.
Yeah. I wish I
I
hadn't put that bit in though, because it was when he was sort of looking at me thinking, "Oh God,
what am I doing in
what
this madman's kitchen?
What am I doing?
He's a nutcase. Why am I looking? And he was very patient with you, I think.
Up until then, he was thinking, he's
I don't know, he's done all right.
New Andrew Moore sitting here.
right.
This is the guy. When David Dimbleby retires, he's got his question time written all over him. This Lovejoy kid.
Kid.
And now he's going, what a loony. He's got some really strange ideas. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed that. So I don't know. We're interviewing interesting
Joking aside,
people.
I really, really enjoyed that interview. I think it was great.
Fascinating people we're interviewing, and we've got more coming up. And very soon, Mark and I will be back with one of our mailbag editions.
And the listeners shout, "No, but they're not very good."
Very soon, very soon. We insist on doing those. Anyway, look, thanks for joining us today. You can contact me on Tim Lovejoy on Twitter. Email is dearlovejoypodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to us, rate us, 5 stars, leave comments. And we'll see you all soon. So for the time being, peace and Lovejoy.
Bye.